Great to meet everyone. My name is Wafiq. We'll basically kick this off by doing introductions, and I'll start by introducing myself. I entered the world of product management after going through a very non-linear path, let's say, and maybe that's a common story for many of you. Of everything available out there, I ended up studying civil engineering, and once I did my first true internship in the world of civil engineering and construction, I was like, this is not for me. Quit my internship, moved into research, and focused on transportation analytics and whatnot, which was parallel to civil engineering, but also kind of gave me my first true steps into the world of data. Fell in love, doubled down, taught myself what I could around machine learning, statistics, programming, and landed my first job as a data scientist. Did that for a couple of years, and quickly realized that I'll never really compete with the likes of Jan LeCun and the big guys out there. So I decided maybe I need to take a different turn. I realized that a lot of my day-to-day was being a conductor at my company. I was trying to build the first data science team, pitch a vision, build the first data science and ML product my company was trying to push out. And I felt that had a lot of similarities with product management, but I wasn't really sure if that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up moving to a larger company. My first one was a startup, the second one was Uber, and I focused on strategy and operations in a very analytical focused role. Did that for a couple of years, and now I got to see the side of being a product manager as a large company versus a small one in the first place. Lots of similarities and a lot of contrasts as well. And I realized that that's something I wanted to experiment and try to do myself as well. So over another 2 years, made the transition and ended up being a product manager at Uber, and that's where I work today. I'm excited to be here with the rest of the panelists. A lot of them have tons of more experience than I do, so I get to ask the questions and learn with the rest of the crew. And this hopefully will be an exciting session for everybody, and we'll be welcoming questions at the end. And I'll pass it on to the panelists to introduce themselves and their companies as well.
Thanks, Wafiq. So everyone, I'm Stacy. I'm a director of product management at Loblaw Digital currently. And I like that Wafiq shared a bit about not having a non-linear path into product. We didn't pre-discuss this, but I hope you guys share too your stories into product. But I studied film at school. You want to talk about a different, divergent path into tech? Hey, we were also talking about how do you get into product management, and I'm really interested, I hope to chat with some more of you at the networking time about how you got into it, but I answered an ad on Craigslist. That's how old I am, too. That's not a path today. So I'm hoping to share a bit of how I've progressed my career in product, and I hope to get some good questions from everybody. Scott.
Great. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Should I go into the whole story right now, or should I save it?
It's up to you.
Yeah. All right.
Maybe talk about the company as well.
I mean, I have a 5-minute story, so I'll make it short. So I also have a very because the usual product management backgrounds either consulting or you did software engineering and you made that switch. For me, I studied business, did strategic finance. So I was working with a lot of ERP software, was building automation on top of it. Went to law school. In law school, at the law firm, I worked at an international law firm, and we were building software to try to sell the legal services instead of through billable hours, but through the software. So lots of privacy and sort of document retention stuff, where there was a lot of different rules in different countries. So I was acting like a product manager because I had sort of the legal domain knowledge, working with an in-house team. After that, I was like, hey, I like to do this a lot more than doing the typical legal work, like contract formation, things like that. And after that, I worked at a venture fund because I felt like that was a good way to explore different domains, see all kinds of different companies that come in the door. At that point, I had no idea what product management the role was because I had only touched upon tech in organizations that are considered a little more legacy or not tech forward. So while in product while in VC, I got to understand sort of the structure of technology companies a lot better, and that's how I discovered product. My first product job was at D2L. It's an ed tech company based out of Waterloo. And then recently I made my way to Pine, because I'm interested in entrepreneurship, and I felt like joining a startup was the best way to learn about that, to see how the startup sort of gets off its legs. I was employee number 10. I joined Pine last year. We have 30 people now. We've also raised a Series A of $25 million this year. So that's, and then to give a little bit of background about Pine, we're a digital mortgage lender. So we build two parts. One is the digital mortgage experience for the customer to make that side easier. We also build the internal CRM and loan origination system that our advisors and underwriters use because we're direct to consumer. So that's a bit about me, a bit about Pine.
All right, I guess that leaves me, and I'm going to pull all of these themes together. So I started out, so I've been in product off and on, I guess, for quite a while. And I say that because, like some other people, I got into product before it was really a thing, right? So now I'm the Senior Director of Product at AudienceView, which is a live event software company. So portfolio of products, they all kind of do different things along that customer journey, hit different parts of the market, and I lead a team of product people. So I actually, kind of like some other folks, started out my journey in the food industry. So I have a degree in food science, which is an obscure degree that not a lot of people have or know what it is. But it's basically the science and physics of food to allow you to scale things up and change it for mass production. So actually, I kind of started out in product, but for food, right? So it was my job to bring new food products to market. So if you've eaten a Tim Hortons bagel or Quiznos bread or Subway, right, those are some of the products that I worked on. And it's very similar, actually, in that you have no authority. You have to rally all of these people across the business to build something and bring it out to the market. So instead of software developers, I had people in a plant, right? So I traveled around North America, kind of bringing products into market, which led me into software. So I started out my software career in the wonderful world of ERP, which was mentioned before. So for those of you that don't know what that is heavy enterprise resource planning type software, so business management software. And it happened that that company wanted to build out a food vertical. So I was brought in as the food industry expert, whatever that means, right? So it was very startup at the time. I think there was 8 of us that were building things and implementing stuff and learning things and selling stuff kind of all together, right? But because I was the industry expert, I really decided what went into product, right? So I helped define the features, I helped prioritize those. But at the time, it wasn't a product thing, right? That wasn't really, it wasn't as prominent or as well defined as it is today. I stayed with that company actually for almost 12 years, helping to build it out. So I did a lot of different roles there, right? I've been a project manager, I've been a business analyst, I've been a practice manager. And then by the time I left there, I was sitting on the executive team as the director of product up until the point of acquisition. So we got acquired by a large company. And that led me to more of a strategic role within that company. So it was my job to figure out their portfolio and how it all fit together, how we should invest, where it hit the market, and what made sense for that overall big food portfolio at this 3,000 person organization, which we're going to talk about later, I think, in terms of size of organization and kind of where you fit and what that means. But I found out that was not for me. I tend to like things where I have a little bit more influence, impact, and I like to build new stuff. So that led me to make a jump into cannabis software. So another interesting path. I came into this company at the start of legalization of cannabis in Canada. So for those of you that are Canadian, you remember what this was like. There were very few rules. There was a ton of money flying around. There was this big competition to be first, and we had happened to get 2 of the largest producers in the world as our first 2 customers for this product. So it was my job to build out the vertical, right? So figure out product market fit, figure out product really definition or what we had to bring to market, and try and understand this industry that was changing every 5 seconds, but had a lot of money floating around, right? So going global, scaling it up rapidly, figuring out legislation, kind of all at this really fast pace. So I was at that company for about 3.5 years during my time there. So I was the VP of product and vertical strategy there. We launched that product, officially built it out, kind of made it into a more mature model, as well as launched a food product, because that's my comfort zone. And then I moved to Audience View, which is interesting because at Audience View, I have no knowledge of the industry, right? So I've been here about 5.5, 6 months. I'm coming into it with no industry knowledge, different software stack, didn't know any of the people. So it's actually a very interesting journey for me because it is making me focus only on product, right? So all of these other things that I was relying on to build that career or to bring those mental models into play, I can't rely on anymore. So it's been an interesting journey for me because now I can only focus on and rely on what I know about product management and how I can grow that side of myself and the business.
Awesome. I want to touch on what you mentioned on working on large versus small companies.
Yes.
Both you and Scott, at the very least, talked about how you started at one place and now you're in a different place. And Scott, congrats on the raise, by the way. Do you have a strong POV as to where PMs should start their career, small versus large? In my experience, at the very least, when I worked for a small company, you are the designer, you are very much limited when it comes to resourcing. The product you're working on is a little bit more high stakes possibly because if it fails, then I don't know how many bets the company can have. But now working at Uber, I've got probably more resources and possibly if I don't succeed, then the company's gonna be fine. But if I win, then hey, that's a little bit more, sugar on top. So in terms of me, for a PM to grow my career, is there a strong POV on where we should start, small versus large? Would love to hear all three panelists.
So I'll start because I want to say it depends.
Of course. Why not?
It always depends, right? It depends on what you're interested in. It depends on how much exposure you want to the whole business, how much influence you want to have, how much risk you want to take on personally, right? So as you referred to, right, if you're working on a small company and you have one product and that product is going to fail or succeed based on decisions that you're making, and thereby the company is going to fail or succeed based on some of those decisions, it's a much different way to operate and a different way to have to think than if you're kind of part of a bigger organization, right? So in one model, right, in the big organization, you have a lot more resourcing. You have a lot of support. You have people that you can talk to. You've got, separate researchers and data analysts. You've got, a product marketing person. You've got a designer. At a small company, you may not have that stuff. So you may have to figure some of that out yourself. And it depends if you like that. Right? So for me, I like that. I like to figure out new things. I like to step in where there's a void and kind of create something new, whatever it is, right? Which is why I've had all of these different roles and paths and journeys, and I've gone into the cannabis industry and all this stuff. So that's what's interesting to me. But I know other people that like to go deep into a piece of functionality and really dive in there and figure it out with all of these other resources that they can rely on. So that's why I say it depends on who you are and what you're interested in and what motivates you and what you want to learn from it. Mm-hmm. So I'll pass that out. Maybe Scott, you can go
Yeah,
next.
for sure.
Scott, did you feel like the first company you worked at as well, to add to the answer, did it give you like brand equity in a sense as well, to kind of a second dimension to the question itself, to take on your new job at Pine?
I don't think most people at Pine knew what D2L was, so maybe not. But I'm sure people know what like Uber is, so there is some brand equity there. I do think that is like a pro and con, because one of the things with joining a startup is that if your startup doesn't become successful one day, you're gonna get less credit for it. Even though like in product interviews, like people say like failures count too, but usually like when you talk about a big success, people can remember it more and it's given more weight, which really sucks because I think in failure you learn a lot more about like what works and what does not work. So I think that is like one aspect for sure. Another sort of aspect is like, how do you like to learn? I think in a larger product org, you're going to have a lot more mentorship. There's going to be a real structured approach to like, you know, all the agile stuff, all like this is how we do product here. So you're going to learn like how to do product in that organization. So that's what you learn sort of in a big org. In a smaller org, the way you learn about product is more hands-on. Like it's you doing it. You decide like what needs to be done. You decide the meetings. You decide all this stuff. So it's a lot more hands-on. It can be a little more overwhelming. So it really depends on the way, sort of how you like to learn. And you have to sort of find those mentorship opportunities by yourself, sort of outside of the organization. So I think that's a big one. As well, I think it's like kind of even like in terms of like a transition over to product. I think in a large org, there's a lot of opportunities to transition into product, but it might be a lot harder because there's also a huge like outside pool. In a smaller org, you're already doing so much, it's really easy to transition to new roles. At startups where you're like under 30 people, most of the times everybody is doing more than one thing. And usually your managers want you to do what you enjoy. And if that happens to be product, then you will end up in product. So I think it's kind of even because there are less roles, like product roles in the smaller orgs.
I guess like building on that, if I was to add to it a little bit, and Stacy, maybe you can help us as someone who hires product managers. Do you look for different things for the PMs coming in from these two different environments as you interview them for roles?
I notice different things in the way they interview. But my advice would be, like I think earlier there was some hands raised around who was earlier in their career trying to get into product. The main thing I want to communicate to those folks in the room, and I'm sure the rest of us who have a few years of experience can test this, whatever path you choose, you're not fucking up. You're not ruining the rest of your career. I've met a lot of folks early in their product career in the last few months, and they're so stressed about that first role. Doesn't matter. Just do, right? Like, whatever experience you bring, you're either going to learn you love startup life, wearing multiple hats and having a lot of impact, or you're going to realize that's too much pressure and I want a good community around me. Go seek that. But like you're building the experience you need and the problems you're solving, either path that you choose. So I think for me, when I'm hiring, I'm looking at what that product manager has to bring to the product they're taking on and owning. Someone with larger company experience, I'll give a great example. So I work specifically this year, I work at Loblaw Digital. I started working on their online grocery business this year. One of the PMs I hired, who's here today, Rachel, took a brand new product and she was, we launched it just before she started. So she's taking an MVP beyond. She's trying to find product market fit. I needed someone who could do that job. I was also hiring at the same time a senior PM to take on our core grocery product and an area of ownership in that. I wanted someone who came from Walmart, who came from like experience working with like really deep stakeholders, very different mindsets. One is not better than the other. That's why we're pushing so hard on like try and enjoy what you're doing and figure out what you kind of enjoy and then build your career from that.
I love that. I think that's a good segue for our second question. The question of should I be a generalist as a PM or a specialist? You were just talking about how there are competencies that you are looking for that basically show that this person leans in well or fits in well to this kind of job. Yeah. I, as a PM, I have my first job looking for my second. Should I be doubling down and looking for opportunities that help me become more focused in one area? It'd be a DS-focused PM, for example, or a design-focused PM, or a platform-focused PM, or however denomination or delineation you want to choose.
I actually do have a not it depends answer to this one.
Oh, wow. That's at first.
I know. We joke, but it's like literally our whole career is based on it depends. The reason I have a black or white answer to this one is because I've come to learn that if you invest in product roles that are more generalist, I think it's an easier transition to leadership. Because you're wearing a lot of hats, you're working with a lot more stakeholders, you're able to flex and flow. Whereas someone who specializes and goes really deep, I think they're going to be a great individual contributor up until like the nth degree and level, or you're going to work at a very specialized role and company where like the depth of knowledge around industry is much better. That's my 2 cents.
Interesting. Scott, Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a valid point. And I can speak from my own experience, right? The reason that I'm in the role that I'm in is because I understand business as a whole. So I can understand all of those different stakeholders and what their needs are and empathize with them, because in some circumstances I've been them, but in other circumstances I worked really closely with them to build up a business, right? So having that allows me to get alignment, allows me to see the bigger picture, allows me to understand all parts of the business. But again, I'm going to harp on the fact that I went that path because that was my natural inclination, right? So my advice on this is also to do what you're interested in, right? Because it doesn't, as was said before, right? One path is not better than the other. But what will be a wrong path is if you're doing something that is in conflict with the way that you like to operate and the things you like to do and the way you like to solve problems, right? So if you force yourself, so if I were to force myself into a deep contribution individual contributor role, which I could, right? I can do that. And actually I have a little bit of a side hustle doing that as a consultant. But I do it because it's actually a nice, easy, fun thing for me. But if I were to force myself to do that at that level all the time, I wouldn't like it, right? I can do it. I don't enjoy it. It would be hard for me just from a motivation standpoint, right? I'm in a generalist path because I like learning about all of these different parts of the business and because I tend to kind of get bored easily, right? So I'm always looking for what's something new that I can learn, what's something new that I can try, where's something I can build it. And so it's going to be suited towards what you're suited to as well, right? So one path is not better than the other. I would agree that if you want to get into more of a leadership path, it helps to have that generalized experience because you're dealing with all of those different groups and all of those different aspects of the business. So when you have those conversations at that level, you can take that into account and you can guide your team accordingly. But if you don't like that, that's okay, right? There's a good path for being an individual contributor at a really deep, high level, right? And loving that too. So go with what you like and what you're good at naturally as well. Don't try and force yourself into one thing because you think it's what you should do.
Or you'll make better money.
Right.
We
Or
all
the
work in
title
tech,
will
it's
make
good.
sense.
It's like baseline, we're good. So like you're in, you're here, like spend more of your life doing what you love, or at least like somewhat. No one loves 100% of what they do. But you know, we spend how many waking hours at our jobs and our
many.
extra time here. Clearly we love it.
Yeah.
Might as well find some joy out of it.
Yeah.
Building on that, actually, Scott, if I may add other dimension to the same question. In Pine, for example, on the specialist and versus generalist question, would you be looking for someone with experience in like financial markets or like a quasi-legal background, like yourself, to be able to take on the role because they would be a better performer?
Sure, yeah. I think there's like two ways to specialize as a product manager. One's like domain specialist, and one's like skill specialist. So skill specialist is like, I'm a growth PM, right?
Yeah.
Domain specialist is like, I'm an ed tech PM. I think it's hard to not start specializing unless you keep on like switching domains or something like that. I've met a lot of product managers that have really specialized, built themselves like a niche, and become sort of thought leaders in that area. I think that's like a very highly respected route. So, for example, when I was at D2L, I had multiple, like I would have regular conversations with our CPO. He's no longer with D2L. He went to run a VC fund to sort of invest. And then out of nowhere, I think Udemy just founded him and was like, hey, like you need to come work for us, right? Nice. That only happens when you've built a lot of like expertise in an area. And a lot of sort of thought leadership. So I do think there are benefits to like specializing either in a domain or sort of like a skill. But like I think for those, like he genuinely enjoys sort of the ed tech field, right? It's you have to pick and choose. And I think like when you get into product management, you have multiple years to do that. Like there's no rush there. It's something that, you know, you work at one company, you're like, oh, I enjoy the work, but maybe not the domain so much. Do I like B2C? Do I like D2C? That's another specialization, right? Because B2B product is a little different from D2C. You care about things that might be a little different. So there's multiple ways you can specialize. And in terms of like that question, when it comes to sort of Pine, I think one of the most valuable experiences you can have is the experience you had prior to product management. But when we're hiring, I don't think we look for that domain knowledge, right? So before I came to Pine, I worked in ed tech, I worked in VC, we saw a whole bunch of different domains, but I had no knowledge about mortgages. So when I came to Pine, I got smart about mortgages. I took the mortgage broker course, so I became licensed to sell mortgages. I called customers on the phone. It doesn't take long to, you know, get deep on a domain. On the other hand, the ed tech domain, it's not as like you know, complicated in terms of like rules and like this is how this is done, this is how this is done. These are the regulations and all this other stuff. And it was a little easier for me to understand that domain because I had used like D2L software before. Like I had used their LMS when I was, you know, still in education, and it's a little easier to understand that side. So I don't think you know, you should like, hey, like I'm not going to apply to this company because I don't have like mortgage knowledge or something like that. Never let that stop you.
Love the diversity of opinion there. One last question, and then maybe we'll pass it over to the audiences. We talked a little bit about leadership. There are only so many like VP positions, director positions, CPO positions out there. We talked about how your ex-manager at D2L went into a VC. Is product management a like young person game? Is it like, oh, you know, I've got 10 years into this profession, and then I need to figure out an exit because the probability of getting a top role is limited given the hierarchy and the triangle itself? Or do you guys think otherwise?
I don't even think that's the goal. It's like, well, if I can't get to this leadership role in this time frame, like that's the out. But I think about this question a lot. I fed it into the panel because one, I'm in my mid-30s. When I hit 30, I was like, beep, 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 beep. My time is coming up in tech. I'm gonna explode. Like, especially as a woman. And I was like, I need to find a path. I either need to be a VC, I need to start my own business, or I need to get into leadership. And I chose my path. But I still think it may not be my only one. But I do think this is a very real conversation. If you folks have not thought about it, or if you're thinking about it, it comes up a lot. I have a friend group in product. We went out to dinner the other week, and this is what spawned this question. Is one of them's in her 40s, and she's like, you know, I'm a product lead. How much longer can I do this job? And I think it's an unfortunate thing, but I do think it's a young person's game. And as a generalist kind of PM, I'm thinking a lot about what kind of skills have I learned can I apply to my future of my career. I don't think my only path will be product leadership. I don't think that's where I'll retire, if I had to guess.
Very interesting. Scott, Jennifer, do you agree?
I think I'll disagree on that. I think just because I feel like which one would I sort of pick? Like somebody with no product experience trying to get into product, or somebody with like 7 to 10 years of product? And obviously I would want to be on that side, because one of the greatest barriers to product is like, hey, associate product manager job, but do you have 2 years of product experience, right? I feel like that sort of cliff is harder to scale versus the other side. But I do agree, there are less sort of positions, and you do see product people going to do other things. And I think you pick up really valuable skills in product. You become a pretty good operator. A lot of product folk end up starting their own companies because, as a product manager, you understand the business side, you understand the tech side. That's a super useful skill. Like, for example, the founder of Pine, he used to be a product manager as well. That happens all the time. So that's one route. As I mentioned, I think his title was like CPO at D2L. I don't remember exactly, but he went to run a venture firm, right? And that's because he had specialized knowledge in ed tech. So that's super useful because if you are like a finance background at VC, you may understand the finances well, but you certainly don't understand the domains well. So building up that domain knowledge becomes really useful. I see people becoming consultants. So they run their own business, consulting with multiple companies in the industry. I don't think any of them are like hard landings. I think they're all pretty interesting opportunities. And who knows, like maybe after 10 years of product, you want to try something new as well, right? So
it's a tough job,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Everyone
what I
in
was
this room
gonna
is
say.
like, yeah, we work really long hours, really long days.
Yeah. Will I have the energy to keep it up in 10 years is a
Or
question.
do I
for
want
sure.
to?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to highlight too. So a few things from that. It can be a hard job, right? There is a high rate of burnout when it comes to product management because you're thinking all the time, right? We were talking about this earlier. It's not one of those jobs where you can coast.
Or turn off at the
Ever,
end of the day.
right? Yeah, you can't really turn it off. You don't coast. You're always looking for ways to make that easier so you have more mental space to always be solving problems, right? Which can get really hard and really exhausting, especially if you can't make progress on it. I think it depends. I think it depends. Just to end this off with where you are, how much energy it gives back to you versus what you expend to it. And I will say that it's one of these career paths where I think there's a lot of opportunity after it should you choose to do it. Because the way that you have to think and the way that you approach scenarios and the way you have to deal with all of these stakeholders and talk to all different parts of the organization and all this kind of day-to-day activity that you're doing actually sets you up for an after, should you choose to, right? So there's consulting, right? I do a little bit of that myself. There's the leadership path, but there's also leadership in roles that are not product, right? So we talked about kind of being a COO. There's a lot of COOs that end up from product.
Yep.
There's CEOs that come from product. There's starting your own business.
Coaching.
Mentor, there's all kinds of paths. And the benefit to this career path is that it teaches you how to think a specific way and how to deal with situations in a specific way and kind of be able to pitch that to all different kinds of people, right? So those skills in and of themselves are really translatable into a lot of other fields. So to answer your question, I don't know that there's a limit on it. I think it's up to you. I think it's up to you and how you feel and if you can sustain that or not and where you end up. But it doesn't necessarily have to stop at pure product management either. Those skills can translate into other things. It can be a mix of those things, right? So it's whatever allows you to translate those skills into something that is more palatable and sustainable for you.
Yes. So what I'm hearing is that it's a safe bet either way.
Yes. It
Also-
depends.
Just like where you choose to start your career in product management, it's a safe bet wherever
we
you
go.
end it.
Sweet. We've got 10 minutes. Would love to hear from the audience. If you have any questions, we can engage with the discussion, please.
Hi.
Hi.
So prior to working at Points, I was working at a startup. It had maybe under 30 people working there. And so when I joined, I launched an MVP mobile app. And there was no data to sort of fall back on when making decisions before launching, you know? And one challenge that I faced was that my executive team was very opinionated about what the product should be. And so I never felt like I owned the product. And I always look back on it and I think, what could I have done differently? So I was looking for any insights from you because we were talking about working at smaller organizations versus larger organizations and how different it is to be a product manager in a startup versus in a big company.
That's a good question. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we talk about how customers influence the roadmap sometimes, and we overfit, but your leadership can influence the roadmap big time, and you end up
huge.
building in the wrong direction, or maybe the right direction. But how do you manage it as a PM?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
At smaller companies, right, you often get that. There's, in my experience, it's often sales, it's the CEO, right, a lot of times, that thinks they know what the idea is best, they understand the market better than you, and they know what's going to close those deals and that kind of thing.
Do we give in?
Pardon?
Do we give in?
No.
Or?
Well, I think the trick is, right, so we talked about stakeholder management earlier. I think the trick is to, understand what's important to them, right? So why are they thinking this way? What do they have at stake? And how can you mitigate those concerns and get them to the conclusion that you want, right? So a lot of that has to do with kind of guiding a conversation, so bringing the facts into it. Okay, so let's make a business case for it, right? So you make it into something that's objective as opposed to subjective, which is what they're bringing in. But a lot of it too is kind of having that confidence to stand up and own it, right? And that's a tough one because I don't know, like you're seeing it as a failure. It's not a failure, it's a learning experience, right? It's an experiment to see maybe what you shouldn't do or how you could do that differently. But a lot of it is what you're projecting, how you own that, how confident you are, how can you, so you don't have a lot of data, but you can still bring facts into that conversation. And then you go through the facts together, right? And does it make sense? Be open to what they're saying. You don't shut it down. But we all have to agree on the conclusion that is a fact-based conclusion with a business case as to how we want to get there. And usually you can agree on something and they will then it's even better because then they'll buy in and be an advocate and a sponsor for that along the way. Sorry, go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, one of the things I'll add to that is like you asking this question because you're like, did I miss out in key experience at this small company versus if I was at a large company? And I would say large companies too have like hippos who
100%.
like tell you what to ship. Doesn't just happen at small B2B companies. So, you know, if I were in an interview with you and you told me about this experience and you just said, well, you know, I didn't have data, I launched this app and like they just told me what to do, I'd be like, oh, that wouldn't quite convince me. But if you said, I didn't have data at this company, but here's what we did to make a factual argument around the direction of the product, and here's how I convinced the stakeholders to go in this path, or here's how we got this like alignment. And that's where we're saying it's equitable experience no matter what context you're in product management, because it always comes back to those core foundational skills and how you translate them in the new context. And it's whether you're happy and successful in that context for your career.
Yeah, I think this like really resonates with me, like this question. Actually, one of the speakers, Daniel, and I talked recently about sort of how CEOs become less hands-on at like the 50 or 70 person mark. And I think this is sort of what you're getting at. When at sort of the 30 person like mark, the CEO is a product manager themselves, right, usually. So you are sort of dealing with that, but I don't think it's very different from being in a product org where you have product people above you as well. So when I was at D2L, I was working on a brand new business line, building a corporate upskilling. But I feel like I have more ownership over the product now than I had over there, even though I was in like a brand new sort of venture within a larger company, because a lot of those things come top down, and there you might be several levels below the decision making. Whereas here, it also depends on which startup you join, right? Because startup founders are very different from each other. And what I mean by that is that one of the key metrics in venture capital you look at is this, are these founders the right fit for this specific product? Are they the right ones to take this? So there's obviously going to be frustrations when you're working with founders who have maybe less domain knowledge in the product that they're building. There's in other cases, like for example at Pine, our CEO Justin, he worked in the U.S. He worked at Blend, which is sort of building the B2B digital mortgage experience for large banks like Wells Fargo and things like that. So he's been around sort of the space. He's done it before. So it's less frustrating in that like I'm learning from him. Like I'm learning insights from him about sort of the domain. And even then, there are things that I'm trying to push for, but that takes some time, right? The first time you pitch it, all right, maybe he's like, no. And you pitch it a couple of times, and eventually you start building like smaller pieces of the thing you're pitching, and if that shows value, then you can continue, right? You have to build up credibility, right? It's very similar to working in non-product roles, right? When you join a new company, people are probably not going to give you like the leash to do whatever you want, right? You have to build out credibility slowly. It's kind of like a cup. You slowly fill it up. And eventually people are like, wow, Scott can take this project from beginning to end. I'm going to give him more responsibility. And that's when you can start like, pitching larger and larger ideas, owning more and more.
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge that probably in some places there's just no escape. Whatever we build in small wins, they'll never really convert. And maybe there's a step of prevention there where we can, in the interview process, actually figure out whether this person is willing to let go of the product and have someone be hired, or are they just going to be on top of it all the time? Same in a large company as well. We have time for one more question. Go ahead.
Hi. I am 3 months into my product career, and and I'm looking for. Do you have any advice on ways to skill myself up without having access to kind of more hands-on experience?
You're here. That's it. Honestly, like you said 3 months?
Mm-hmm.
Here, like meet people, talk to people. We were actually talking about this before we jumped up on the panel. How important community is essential. Our job, it was mentioned earlier today, lone wolf, right? You can feel like you're on an island and you're questioning the decisions you're making, and it can be very lonely, even when you work at an Uber or a very large organization. Community is everything. Like, meet people, ask questions, build relationships. That's like the best advice I can give you, and congratulations on jumping into your first role and for investing in yourself and being here, because investing in yourself is the only way you're going to keep going.
Thank you. And so you're a part of my community now, so
Yeah.
I appreciate
Keep us accountable.
everyone welcoming me.
I think there's also like a lot of self-learning that you can do as well. There's a lot of free resources out there. I know when I got into product, I looked at a lot of them. Like obviously there's a lot of paid resources out there, but I think there's a lot of really, really good free resources. For example, there's this product management GitHub. That if you just Google product management GitHub, there's a ton of resources in that. I don't know who curates it, but somebody spent a lot of time curating articles all across the internet. There's also, there's like product leaders out there that share their thoughts. There's, pseudo product people, for example, Stratechery, right? That a lot of the stuff they talk about on there is about product and business decisions that became successful or became failures, and they really dissect it apart. I think those are good ways to build frameworks of thinking. So I think there's a lot of sort of resources out there. And each time you read a resource, they usually link to other ones. This is probably for search engine optimization, but you will be able to like go through the web and like just branch out.
Podcasts too.
Yeah.
Podcasts. There's also, you talked about community. There's also groups out there that you can join that work through problems together, right? Sure. So you can take theoretical problems into those groups and work through it and actually go through some of those case study examples together and get feedback from one another. And in doing that, you're actually building this group of people that you can ask other stuff to, right? So it's all about kind of engaging with others in that community, finding those groups that work for you. And then because a lot of them are free, right? It doesn't cost you anything but time. And so with this career, so much of that stuff is kind of self-initiated learning, right? There's tons of content out there. There's tons of groups, lots of support networks, communities, all kinds of stuff that you can
Meetups.
actually, yeah, meetups, right? That you can take advantage of and, you know, make use of those resources. But find people to practice with and talk through things. Because like Stacy was saying, right, these kind of groups here, one of the biggest takeaways or advantages of them is meeting those people and developing those connections. And then you can call them up later or whatever and say, what do you think about this? Or I'm working through this. And how do you think I should approach this situation? Right? And then you've got that support because we kind of need it. It's been my experience anyway.
Sweet. I think we're right on time. Correct me if I'm wrong. So
All right.
we'll stop it here. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.